There is a before and an after. A line drawn through your life so stark that everything on one side feels like it belongs to someone else. Someone who didn't know what you now know, who hadn't yet seen what you've seen, who still believed the world was fundamentally safe. Trauma doesn't just change your memories. It changes the architecture of your mind, the way you perceive threat, the way you move through the world. People who haven't experienced it often misunderstand what happens next. They think healing means forgetting, that recovery looks like returning to who you were before. But the brain doesn't work that way. Trauma rewrites neural pathways, alters stress responses, reshapes the very structures that process fear and safety. Understanding what actually happens inside your brain after trauma is not just science. It's the beginning of compassion for why healing is so much harder than anyone who hasn't lived it could possibly understand. There is a moment when the world stops making sense. It happens during or immediately after the traumatic event, a rupture so complete that your basic assumptions about reality shatter. The brain, which had been operating on the fundamental belief that you are safe, that the world is predictable, that your body is sovereign, suddenly has no framework for what's happening. This is not dramatic language. This is literal cognitive dissonance at the neurological level. The experience doesn't fit into existing mental models, so the brain struggles to process it at all. Time distorts, memory fragments. Some details become impossibly vivid, while others disappear entirely. This is dissociation, the mind's emergency protocol when reality becomes unbearable. In the immediate aftermath, nothing feels real. You move through the world like you're watching yourself from outside your body. People speak to you, and their words don't penetrate. This disconnection is not weakness. It's protection. Your brain is doing the only thing it can do when the system is overwhelmed. It compartmentalizes, separates, creates distance between you and the unbearable thing that just happened. Your brain's response to trauma is not random. It is the product of millions of years of evolution, designed to maximize survival in the face of mortal threat. When danger is detected, the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, triggers a cascade of physiological changes. Stress hormones flood your system. Your heart rate spikes. Blood flow redirects from non-essential functions to muscles needed for fight or flight. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought and planning, goes partially offline because careful deliberation is too slow when survival is at stake. This is adaptive during the trauma itself. The problem is that these survival mechanisms don't easily deactivate when the danger passes. Your amygdala, having learned that catastrophic threat is possible, becomes hypervigilant, scanning constantly for signs of danger. Your nervous system remains in a state of high alert, ready to mobilize at the slightest provocation. This is not paranoia. This is your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do: prioritize survival over everything else. Assume threat until proven otherwise. Never be caught unprepared again. Trauma doesn't just affect brain function, it alters brain structure. The amygdala, which processes fear and threat, becomes hyperactive and often enlarged. It's like an alarm system with the sensitivity turned up so high that it triggers constantly, interpreting neutral stimuli as dangerous. The hippocampus, responsible for contextualizing memories and distinguishing past from present, often shrinks. This is why traumatic memories don't feel like normal memories. They lack the temporal context that says, "This happened then, not now." Instead, they intrude as if they're happening in the present moment. The prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotional responses and executive function, shows reduced activity. This is why trauma survivors often struggle with emotional regulation, decision-making, and impulse control. Not because they lack willpower, but because the brain region responsible for these functions is compromised. These changes are measurable on brain scans. They are not imagined, not exaggerated, not a sign of weakness. They are the physical evidence of what trauma does to the organ responsible for every thought, feeling, and behavior you experience. Trauma lives in the body long after the conscious mind has stopped thinking about it. The nervous system remains dysregulated, stuck in survival mode even when objectively safe. This manifests in ways that seem irrational to others, and sometimes even to yourself. You startle at sudden sounds. Your heart races in situations that shouldn't be threatening. You feel agitated or numb without conscious awareness of why. Your body tenses in response to triggers you haven't consciously identified. This is not psychological. This is physiological. Trauma creates what's called autonomic dysregulation. The sympathetic nervous system, responsible for mobilization and fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest and recovery, lose their normal balance. You swing between hyperarousal, anxiety, panic, hypervigilance, and hypoarousal, numbness, dissociation, collapse. Sometimes both at once. Your rational mind knows you're safe now, but your body hasn't received that message. It continues to react as if danger is imminent, because the trauma rewired the pathways that determine what registers as safe versus threatening. The shift begins when you stop seeing your responses as failures and start seeing them as adaptations. Every symptom that feels like brokenness is actually your nervous system trying to protect you. The hypervigilance is an attempt to prevent future harm. The emotional numbness is a defense against overwhelming feelings. The intrusive memories are the brain's attempt to process and integrate what happened. This doesn't make the symptoms less painful, but it changes their meaning. You are not weak for struggling. You are not damaged beyond repair. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do in response to circumstances that overwhelmed its normal coping mechanisms. This understanding is the foundation of healing, not because it solves anything immediately, but because it replaces shame with compassion, self-judgment with curiosity. The question shifts from "what's wrong with me" to "what happened to me?" and "how is my brain trying to cope with it?" This is not a small shift. This is the difference between seeing yourself as broken and seeing yourself as injured, between hopelessness and the recognition that what was changed can, with time and the right support, be changed again. Healing from trauma is not about erasing what happened or returning to who you were before. It's about integration, helping the brain process the traumatic memory so it becomes part of your history instead of your present. This happens through a process called memory reconsolidation. When traumatic memories are recalled in a safe context, with support and regulation, the brain has an opportunity to update the memory with new information, that the threat is over, that you survived, that you are safe now. This doesn't delete the memory, but it changes how it's stored, moving it from the amygdala's alarm system into the hippocampus, where it can be properly contextualized as past rather than present. The nervous system can also be retrained through practices that engage the body, somatic therapy, breathwork, movement. The autonomic nervous system gradually learns to return to baseline after activation. The window of tolerance, the range of arousal you can handle without becoming dysregulated, slowly expands. This is not quick. This is not linear. But it is possible. The same neuroplasticity that allowed trauma to rewire your brain also allows healing to rewire it again. What remains after trauma has been integrated is not the person you were before. That person no longer exists, and grieving that loss is part of the process. But what emerges is not lesser. It's different. There is knowledge now that cannot be unknown. A depth of understanding about suffering, about resilience, about the fragility and strength of the human spirit. The hypervigilance may soften, but likely won't disappear entirely. The body may always carry some memory of what happened. But these responses become manageable rather than consuming. You learn to recognize when your nervous system is activated and develop tools to help it regulate. You understand your triggers and can navigate them with more skill. The traumatic memory, when integrated, loses its power to hijack your present. It becomes something that happened to you, not something that is happening to you. This is the paradox of trauma recovery. You don't go back to who you were, and that's actually okay. You become someone who knows what it is to be broken and to heal, to fall apart and to reorganize, to carry unbearable weight and discover you're stronger than you knew. And that knowing, forged in the worst moments of your life, becomes a foundation for a different kind of wholeness.